Hi, I'm Mary Agrusa. I'm the research assistant here at the Savoy Automobile Museum. The automotive industry learned very quickly that if you race on Sunday, you can sell on Monday. Automotive racing drives car sales, and much to their delight, the same thing happened when it applies to music. The more the people heard and sang songs about cars, the more car sales increased. So our exhibit carTUNES on display focuses primarily on the music and the cars of the rock and roll period of the 1960s. Okay, so we're going to start our tour with the 1903 Oldsmobile Curved Dash Roundabout. Now this is the oldest car that we have in the museum. It's also the first one that we purchased, and probably for any of us that are listening to this video, none of us were alive when the music for this car came out. But this is a very early example of a car. You'll notice it has the chassis of a horse and buggy. The body is very plain, it's wood, so we can say this was like an original Woody. No steering wheel, parking lights, no headlights, and the tires are white, and that's because this is the natural color of rubber. The tire industry and the car industry are developing together at the same time. Many years later, when they added carbon black to tires, tires became more robust. So now talking about the music with this car. Back in the day, there was a song written called In My Merry Oldsmobile. And in the song, we can see here on the cover, is Billy. Now he's the hero of our song. He loves two things. He loves his curved dash old, and he loves his girlfriend. And we notice here that he's sitting very close to her with his arm around her because he's going to teach her how to use the tiller. Now, a car like this afforded a couple an opportunity, a certain amount of privacy. It got you away from your parents, it got you away from the nagging, pestering little brothers and sisters. And it was a great way to just get out and be away on your own. So in the music, there is a line and it says, "To the church will swiftly steal, our wedding bells will peal. You can go as far as you like with me in my merry Oldsmobile." Now, whenever I mention that line of the song when I do a tour, inevitably people will give me a sort of like a, "You just said what?" But we have to realize that in 1903, talking about "you can go as far as you like with me" did not mean the same thing back then that it does today. It was very innocent. It really meant, you can travel with me as far as I drive in my car. Now, Mr. Olds, he was one of the pioneers, along with Henry Ford, who understood there was more money to be made if you make cars for the masses than if you just concentrate on building them for the wealthy, even though the wealthy could pay for them in advance. Because of that, he wound up getting kicked out of his own company. And so he went and he started a second company up in Lansing, Michigan. He could not use the name Oldsmobile, so it was called Rio after his initials. They made cars. He was very successful. And then he came up with the idea of creating what we call the first factory-built stake body or pickup truck. Now, you could get trucks before that, but you would buy a chassis and a cab, and someone would fashion the back according to your specifications. Rio was producing a ready-made truck that you could buy straight from the factory. They were so good at this that eventually they dropped making cars and went strictly into truck production. And the first one that they made was called the Speedwagon. Now, many, many years later, there's a band member who's taking a transportation class up at the University of Illinois. He walks into class, and the word Rio Speedwagon is written on the board because that's what they're going to study. And he took a look at that and said, "That's a good name for a band," and that's where REO Speedwagon got their name. Now, Rio, the truck manufacturer, eventually merges with another truck manufacturer called Diamond T, and they become Diamond Rio. And there's a country music band that was named Diamond Rio. They spelled Rio R-I-O, but they said, yes, we got it from the truck that we saw. And last but not least, the rail line that ran next to the factory up in Lansing, Michigan, was called the Grand Trunk Western Railroad. Well, back in the 70s, there was a band coming up, and they wanted to have more of a blue-collar image, so they thought, well, we'll call ourselves the Grand Trunk Railroad. Their manager said, you know, funk probably will sound better than trunk, and so Grand Funk Railroad got their name. So Mr. Olds had this additional impact in the music industry, probably in a way that he never, ever would have dreamed of. Okay, so we're going to jump ahead about 50 years, and we've got another Oldsmobile. Now, of course, this is an offshoot of Mr. Olds' original company. He is no longer alive. But this is the 1950 Oldsmobile 88. And you may be wondering, what has that got to do with music? Well, it wasn't the car, it was the engine that was called the Rocket 88. But to give you a little background history, before the Second World War, when kids were coming into their adolescence, the whole idea was you were leaving behind childish things, and so you started to dress like your parents because you were preparing to become an adult, but you also listened to the same music that your mom and dad did. Everybody listened to the big bands. Well, when the Second World War came along, kids who were in adolescence, that got completely disrupted. And a lot of things that you normally did, like dances and proms and dating and things like that, were completely interrupted. And in some cases, many young men and even some young women sort of got a crash course in adulthood because they wound up going and fighting in the Second World War. Well, after the war, as that group became parents, they came up with two sort of like underlying ideas. First, we're going to make sure, we're going to try to give our kids everything that we missed out on, and we don't want them to grow up too fast. And so by the 50s, as this generation, now their group of kids are now becoming adolescents, all of a sudden, this becomes a very marketable group of people. They don't dress like their parents anymore. Guys wearing like leather jackets and dungarees, Dad didn't dress like that. Girls wearing poodle skirts, bobby socks, saddle shoes, Mom didn't dress like that. And you didn't listen to the same kind of music. Well, where in the world would you get something new? Well, there was something in the black community called rhythm and blues. Very much, if you think of blues and the subject matter, a lot of times it had to do with the hardships of life. A lot of times this was really like adult music, and oftentimes rhythm and blues was played in clubs and bars, usually an adult venue, and so there would be themes, and I'm not talking about being rude or risque, but there would be themes and topics talked about that adults would understand that you wouldn't necessarily discuss in front of your children. Well, rhythm and blues became a perfect outlet for if you want to have music that the parents aren't going to listen to. That started making its way into the mainstream. However, it really in some cases had to be sanitized. So for example, when the original version of Shake, Rattle, and Roll that was done by Joe Turner came out, if you listen to it and then you listen to the popular version by Bill Haley in the comments, you'll notice there are a couple lines that have been changed. Now for us, if you listen to it today, you go, what was the big deal? But you have to remember, back in the 50s, this was a time of censorship. Anything that was live, radio or television, it was on a 15-second delay. If you said the wrong thing, if you dropped a curse word, you got blipped out. So they were really watching what got said. So as rhythm and blues was making the transfer over, sometimes they had to sanitize the lyrics. And so get back to Rocket 88. 19-year-old guy by the name of Ike Turner. If you're familiar with Ike and Tina Turner, he writes the song, and his saxophone player by the name of Jackie Brenson records it. And there's a couple lines in this song, and it will give us an idea of like how you had to tweak things. He sits there and goes, let me introduce you to my Rocket 88. She's straight, can't wait, everybody loves my Rocket 88. Now he's talking about the engine, he's not talking about the car. But the Rocket 88 is not a straight inline engine, it's a V8. So what is straight and can't wait? Well, now we started bringing out what we would call the double entendre. You would bring something, you would say something, but you could take it one way or another. So he's obviously not talking about the engine, so what to him is his Rocket 88? Well, that is up to you, the listener, to determine, and you could take it any number of ways. but it was a matter of how they could clean up the lyrics so that it would pass through the censors. Now, one of the benefits of bringing R&B music in, it opened up the door to a lot of black artists and musicians and composers, and by the 60s, we had the explosion of Motown that really brought rock and roll music up to a whole nother level. And so this car here, when it was on, as you see it today, if you were back in the 50s, this is what you drove in NASCAR. This was the stock car of stock car racing of NASCAR. Maybe you changed your tires, maybe you added a safety belt. And if you had a wily mechanic who knew how to tweak this, that the people that tore you down wouldn't know, you were basically driving a stock car. And the benefit was, if it was strictly stock, if it broke down and there was somebody had one out in the parking lot, you may be able to borrow parts from the guy in the parking lot so you can continue racing. This car, using a Rocket 88 engine, also won the La Carrera Panamericana race, which is what we call the Great Mexican race. It's a long road race down in Mexico. The Rocket 88 won that by a large margin. But Rocket 88, the song, is considered by many to be the first rock and roll song ever recorded, and that's why it's here in our gallery today. Okay, so back in the 60s, we all wished that we had a grandmother that lived in Pasadena, grew gardenias, and had a rickety old garage, and in it was a brand new shiny red super stock Dodge, which is what this is. Now, truth be told, from that song, The Little Old Lady from Pasadena, Granny never got her hands on this car. This wasn't even a production car. What happened was, all the major manufacturers came out with what were called the Hemi engine. Chrysler trademarked it, so they were the only ones allowed to call it a Hemi. Everybody had the same technology. Well, NASCAR came along and said, you can't run it because it's too fast. Well, what are the manufacturers going to do with this all-powerful engine? Aha, the NHRA, the National Hot Rod Association for Drag Racing. They don't care how fast you go. In fact, the faster, the better. And so now all the major manufacturers had an outlet for these super powerful engines. This is Dodge's response to it. It's referred to as the A990 Sedan. It actually is a modified Dodge Coronet designed specifically to do one thing, go fast in a straight line. And so it is part of what they called the super stock class. It wasn't stock. The stock class was straight from the factory. This was called super stock because it had the larger engine and it had some modifications to it. Now, the super stock class eventually led way to what we called the factory experimental, which also ultimately led to what we now know today as the fuel funny cars. But in this case, this car was modified in order to make the super stock class. You'll notice it only has one headlight. The car actually would have two. Everything is about weight reduction on these cars. The engine had some special equipment that made it 70 pounds lighter. The whole front end of the car was what they called chemically milled. Basically, they dipped all the metal in acid and lightened the gauge of the steel. You weren't allowed to use fiberglass in super stock. It had to be metal, but they lightened the steel. One windshield wiper, you don't need two when you're stock car, when you're drag racing. If you look inside, no visors, no radio, no heater, no defroster. The seats that we have in here are very lightweight from a Dodge van. There's no carpeting, no sound deadening, no back seat. Anything that could be discarded was removed because it's all about weight. And if you look at the profile of the car, it sits higher in the front than it does in the back, and that's for weight transfer, because when you hit the gas, you want all of that weight to go to the back wheels, that you get good traction on the ground, and that you get a good clean start off. So the little old lady from Pasadena, had she been driving this and hit the gas and didn't know what she was doing, probably the whole front end of the car would have lifted off. So she would have never been driving this. But it was a great marketing campaign. Because what happened after the war, a lot of people moved to California, and a lot of guys built muscle cars. And traditionally, the wife lives longer than a husband, and so you had a lot of little old ladies all through California that had muscle cars that would trade them in. And so one used car dealer there came out with put a Dodge in your garage with a little old lady driving the muscle car in, and Chrysler saw it and made it a national campaign, and that's where Jan and Dean came out with the song. So as much as we really hoped that our grandmother was going to be the terror of Colorado Boulevard, unless she was Shirley Muldowney, she wasn't getting in that car. Nice idea, but not reality. So according to the Beach Boys, they were going to save their pennies and save their dimes so they could buy the 4-speed dual quad Positraction 409. Now that song was wildly popular, but the 409 in terms of a drag car was already making its mark on the drag strip. However, guys would go into the dealership and they'd say, I want the car that's in the song, because if you listen to it, the word Chevrolet never shows up at all, and the 409 was a Chevrolet engine. So what was so special about it? Well, the 409 engine was cubic inches, it was 409 horsepower. At least that's what it was supposed to be. Now, the engineers told the marketing department that they could bring it up to like 425. The marketing department said no, and without telling anybody, they did it anyway. And about midway through the year, 1962, guys who were dynoing the engines found out, wait a minute, we've got 425 horsepower, not 409. And so when the dealers found out about it, they began holding these back because they could sell a car like this at a premium to someone who's going to go and race it. So what's interesting, this is a 62 Bel Air bubble top, beautiful glass on the back here that surprisingly, first they only found out about this by accident in a wind tunnel, but it was only available on the Bel Air. And the Bel Air was not the top of the line, that was the Impala. You couldn't get it on an Impala. And so you look at this and you think, well, the Bel Air is sort of the dorky little sister of the Impala. The Impala gets all the chrome. The Impala got bucket seats. You couldn't get them in the Bel Air. But if you were a drag racer, you didn't care because those would be 70 pounds heavier. And this car was lighter than the Impala. And the company actually made it easier and cheaper for you to eliminate things to get the car for less money. Probably didn't make the marketing department happy, but for $300 less, you could eliminate your heater and your radio, and they'd even take off the antenna for aerodynamic purposes. But the car was a hit on the drag strip, very powerful, very popular. Now the guy that owns this car, it took him 25 years to find it. This is a 4-speed dual quad Positraction 409. Surprisingly, for drag racing purposes, you didn't want the dual quads. They were very, very hard to tune. If you put something like the wrong air filter on it, you would lose horsepower. So a lot of them, on the racers, they took them off and just went with a single quad. You don't have a lot of turnaround time in drag racing. They didn't want to be caught trying to fuss with it to get the car in tune. But the gentleman who found it, like I said, he looked for this for 25 years. He found it out in Pomona. He said it's a great place to go if you're going to look for cars because they don't have rust, because they don't have the salt and the snow and the other things that are problems like for us here over in the Northeast. He spent 5 hours with the guy wiping the rain off of the car because it rained that day, and the original owner never brought the car out in the rain. But he found the 409 that he had been looking for all those years, and he was graciously enough to loan it to us. So the Beach Boys also sang about having fun, fun, fun now that Daddy took the T-Bird away. Now, when that song first came out, the Thunderbird was never designed to be a hot rod. That was not Ford's intent. So when I heard the song, I was like, take the T-Bird away. What? It's just a big clunky cruiser car. But what happened was they were doing a promo at a radio station, found out, talking to the station manager, that he had a T-Bird. He also lent it to his daughter, who said she was going to be doing some schoolwork, and when he found out, no, she wasn't doing schoolwork, she was busy riding around town, and so he took her keys away and they made the song about it. So this is what we would call the second iteration of the Thunderbird. This is the Bullet Bird. When they first came out, they were the baby birds. Those were the little two-seaters. This is now what they call the Bullet Bird, and this is coming out in the 60s, and everything is about rocketry, the space race. And so you see the front of this, and it almost has like the nose cone of the rocket. And if you follow the line going back, we have this little mini fin that almost flares out like the side of a rocket. And of course, the tail light is round like the booster on a rocket. So everything is very aerodynamic about the cars, and not just about this car, but about a lot of the cars in general, because we are in the space race. Well, this is the Sports Roadster, and it is actually a four-seater. We do have the fiberglass tonneau cover on it. And when the Thunderbird first came out in 1955, from 55 to 57, it was a two-seater. And then a gentleman at Ford Motor Company by the name of Robert McNamara decided, let's make it a four-seater. Now, for the people that love the two-seater, they were like chagrined, you're gonna wreck it. Well, surprisingly, the four-seater sold better than the two-seater. So this is the four-seater with the fiberglass. You can remove this. You'll have a full bench seat in the back. So it gave you the option. You could be a two-seater Roadster, four-speeder convertible. One of the people that really loved this car was a gentleman by the name of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And before he became president, he owned Thunderbirds. They were one of the last cars he drove, because once you become president, you don't drive out in public anymore. And so he hired a guy by the name of Robert McNamara from Ford Motor Company to come and be part of his cabinet. And Robert McNamara, as a great person who understood product placement, he got 50 Thunderbirds placed in JFK's inaugural parade. Now, JFK rode in the Cadillac limousine, but he got product placement of 50 Thunderbirds in probably one of the biggest television events of the year. And so talk about the wisdom of getting the product out in front of the public. Robert McNamara did this. Now, these cars have a very special design to them, but also a very special accessory. And they came, if you wanted to fork over over $300, you could get what were called the Kelsey Hayes wire wheels. Great wheels. The problem was this car was too heavy. And so, on occasion, the wheel would collapse. So what did Ford Motor Company do? Did they fix the wheel? No, they just gave you a new one. And that worked for a while until there was someone who had a problem that made the news, and it was this guy over here. It was the king of rock and roll. He owned one of these cars. When his wheel collapsed, it made the news, okay, and now Ford had to fix the problem. So they found that just by making the diameter of the spoke a 1/16 of an inch wider, problem solved. Well, not exactly. Because another problem that the car had is that the tires would go flat. And that's because there wasn't a good grip or a bond between the wheel and the tire, and the air would leak out. So how do you fix that? Well, it's a tubeless tire, so the obvious solution is let's stick a tube in a tubeless tire, because a tube can't leak. Well, tubeless tires are not designed to have tubes in them, and they would build up excess heat. So now what do you do to fix that problem? Well, why don't we drill lots and lots of tiny pinholes all around the side wall of the tire, and that way the heat can dissipate. That didn't work too well either. And so while Ford was really trying to rob Peter to pay Paul to fix the problem, they sort of let the Thunderbird quietly disappear, because later in 1964, a car came out that Ford created called the Mustang, and that took the world by storm. And on the opening day that the Mustang went for sale, they sold 22,000 cars. That is still a record today. And that car, just last year in 2024, celebrated its 60th consecutive year of being built. The Corvette is older, but the Corvette, there was no 1983 Corvette, so the Mustang for a production for a customer production car, has the record for the longest car in production. So everybody sort of forgot about what happened with the Thunderbird and the collapsing wheels, because the Mustang solved all the problems for Ford Motor Company. Little GTO really looking fine. 3 deuces and a 4-speed and a 389, and according to Ronnie and the Daytonas, she would beat their gassers and the rail jobs. No, she didn't. She couldn't even beat that red car back there. And Pontiac knew that. Now, this was a creation of John DeLorean, Mr. Muscle Car. It is a good car. It is a powerful car. But Pontiac knew they were not really the top tier car. There were others that were a little bit better. So how do you deal with that? Well, according to one of their advertising executives, it was as if the advertising gods smiled on Pontiac, the heavens opened up, and 2 events came about that gave them the way to market the car and make it what it became. On one hand, Humble Oil created the advertising campaign called "Put a Tiger in Your Tank." And you would see an illustration of a family driving down the car and everybody's happy, and sitting on the back is this huge tiger with a big smile on his face because, hey, I'm making sure that the family car has plenty of power because this is good gasoline. And then what happened was Uniroyal made these beautiful red line tires. You could only get them standard on a GTO as stock equipment. And Uniroyal called them Tiger Paws. So Pontiac came back and said, well, if there's Tiger Paws that it's running on, this is the tiger. And so in one ad, they took a tiger skin and they laid it across the front of the hood. And then in other ads, they would have a real tiger sitting in the back of the car, and the whole image they created was, this is a beast looking for prey. And so all of a sudden, the image in your head was, this thing is powerful. This is wild and powerful. And so the executive said, we had the song going on in the radio. If you went down to your Pontiac dealer for half the price of a 45, you could get this record called GTO by the Tigers. I never heard of it when I was a kid, and I went up and I listened to it. It's pretty cheesy. But there was also a shoe franchise up in the Northeast called Tom McCann, and they had different brands of men's shoes that were called GTO shoes. You could buy GTO cologne. And so the advertising executives at Pontiac turned this into a lifestyle. And they said, that's the way we marketed it. And in the same way that clothes would make the man, well, so did clothes make the car. And guys bought it up like crazy. Now, that was part of the reason why it became Car and Driver's Car of the Year. Part of it was the mechanics and the speed and the way the car was built, but it was also how they marketed the car and really turned it into something that was desirable. Now, this actually is a it's a Pontiac Tempest LeMans. It didn't become the GTO as a standalone brand until the next year. So in 1964, if you had one of these, you would go into your insurance agent and say, I've got a GTO Pontiac Tempest, I have a Pontiac Tempest LeMans, cheap insurance. Well, by the next year, the insurance companies had wised up that there's this option package called the GTO, which takes the Tempest LeMans to a whole different level. So I had a boyfriend in high school. This looked exactly like his car, same color, same year, same everything, which is in a way why this car is so special to me, other than the fact that I just love the design. And I was with him when he went to pay his car insurance. And so he went in there with the line to the insurance agent, I have a Pontiac Tempest LeMans. And the insurance agent was no fool. He said, oh, and any option package. And he had to admit that he did have the GTO package. And his driving record was not exactly squeaky clean. And he was the first person that I ever met that had monthly insurance payments along with his monthly car payment. And he was almost car poor by the time he was paying the insurance and the payments on the car, but he had the GTO. That's how well it was marketed, and that's how well received the car was. Now, back in the 80s, a group called the Go-Go's also sang about this car, called Skid Marks on My Heart, and they are lamenting how the boyfriend has the GTO and he's spending all of his time and money on the car and not on her. And then finally in the 90s, a smaller, lesser-known group by the name of White Heart came out with a song called God Loves Convertibles, and they're talking about putting the top down on their GTO and going for a ride. So it's a heartbreaker, it's a fun car to drive, but it was also a very slick marketing campaign that made this car as popular as it was.